Hello and welcome to 20 Good Summers. I'm Paulina Briskova, and this is
Jeff Greenstein. We did it. We got it perfect.
Charlie, not we. You finally jumped in when you were supposed to. Hallelujah! He is Jeff Greenstein, and he has finally figured it out.
Right, and welcome to episode 6, guys.
Oh my God, it's
Isn't that amazing?
episode 6.
Episode
That's right.
6.
And for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube but are listening, please know that we are right now in Jeff's backyard in early March in California.
In robes.
We are in robes. This is true. Those of you who are just listening probably didn't. I don't know if you needed that image, but
Maybe.
maybe you did. The fact is, it's such a beautiful, glorious day outside in early March. We didn't want to sit inside, and
Exactly.
it was time to do an episode.
Yeah,
So
time to do an episode, and I just, perhaps this will help drive home what I don't think people have entirely come to terms with, which is how entirely homebrew this enterprise is. We have no producer, we have no studio, we have no advanced technical knowledge to respond directly to one of the emails we got. No, we have no publicist for the show.
that's
It's
right. The
just-
publicity team is this one right here.
It's just the two of us recording an episode wherever we happen to be. And as P said, it is so glorious out right now that we couldn't give up on this chance to enjoy this beautiful Southern California afternoon. That said, you're going to hear a lot of ambient sound, okay?
Yes, you're going to hear there. I can hear dogs. This is not Ludwig. Ludwig is sleeping somewhere.
Yes.
You will hear our neighbors, their neighbors' children. You will hear birds and
Helicopters.
Yes.
The tour buses down on Mulholland Drive pointing out the houses of people infinitely more successful than we. There's a lot
Just
to...
more famous.
Okay. All right. That's right. We're emotionally successful. Anyway, so you're getting this wonderful morning edition of us. Ludwig is actually not asleep. I'm looking right at him.
Okay, well, he's probably going to
All
make
right.
his way up here.
He's A.
Point.
Yes. So here we are again. Thank you, everyone who wrote into us. We covered some of your emails in the last episode. We're going to cover a couple in this one, but there was a specific topic P wanted to talk about in this episode. Do you want to roll it out for our faithful listeners?
Sure. The topic was vulnerability, and specifically male vulnerability. Okay, so now we all know anybody that follows Brene Brown, or even for that matter, Instagram memes.
Yes.
There's a lot of vulnerability is a superpower kind of thing going around right now, and I would absolutely agree with that. But when it comes to men, is vulnerability really a superpower?
Wow. Beautifully done. Beautifully done. I think that, yes, vulnerability is a superpower. It's something I've talked about in the context of your Instagram, because I think your willingness to be vulnerable allowed people to see the real you, to connect with you, to understand the true dimensions of who you are as a person, to understand the struggles that you've been through. But I don't know if people want that from guys.
Yeah, and that is what I would really like to talk about today. So, just to let's turn this on Jeff for a moment, because he happens to be a man, no matter how many gay vibes he has.
Is gay vibes going to feature in every episode of the show?
Until we get sick of it. Until I get sick of
All
it.
right,
But
no,
it's really intimidating.
I can handle
Well, this is why you are a confident man, and I am madly in love with you.
it. Thank you.
Yes, it's very sexy when you have a confident man who can totally take the gay vibes.
Yes, exactly. All right, please continue.
Anyway, the point being that Jeff is a man, and I find him beautifully vulnerable. But I've always looked for men who were vulnerable, and I have mistaken. Um, uh, I, I don't even know what it would be called. I have mistaken another quality with vulnerability, and we're going to figure this out as we keep talking, because it's not at the top of my tongue, and I don't want to take the time to find it.
Well, let's take a beat before we cross over and talk about me. I want to talk about like kind of the paradigms of masculinity
Okay.
that you came with when you started dating, when you started being attracted to guys, seeking partners and so forth. What was the paradigm? What did you bring to the marketplace, as it were?
I think it's not about what I brought to the marketplace. It was what I was looking
What were you
for in the
looking for?
marketplace,
Exactly.
right? I went to the market, and what was I looking for?
Exactly.
Well, I was looking for somebody like my parents, of course, and my grandmother, the people that brought me up. So I was looking for somebody shiny and charismatic and talented and beautiful and a total narcissist.
How many displays of genuine vulnerability did you see from those caregivers,
Uh,
male and female?
well, and this is where it gets interesting. Of course, I didn't really spend very much time with my father, so I'm not aware that I actually ever saw any particular vulnerability from my father. And my grandmother, who was really sort of my primary caregiver, uh, you could argue that she showed vulnerability, but you could also just call it being a drama queen and a martyr.
Yeah, that's tricky. Can we talk about that distinction for a minute? Because I think, yes, drama queen, martyr, displays of kind of victimhood, like
Right.
talking about how beset you are, how the world has dealt you a tough hand. Is that vulnerability?
I think it at times passes for vulnerability, but when it comes down to it, it probably isn't. I think I think when you're okay, so let's just take an example,
Go
right?
for it. Yeah.
So let's say that I come home every day from work and I tell you how miserable this one colleague makes me.
Yes.
I never do anything about it.
Right.
And I keep coming home day after day going, oh, just like, but if only he wasn't there, he's making my life so miserable. And I think what he did today was sexual harassment and on and on and on and on. Am I being vulnerable or am I perhaps being something else?
Yeah, this is a really interesting and often difficult to parse distinction because, we talked in a prior episode about the kindergarten teacher's rule when confronted with a child in trouble, right? Do you want to be hugged, heard, or helped? Okay. You come home from that bad day at work, you want to be heard, probably, right? Maybe you want to hear from your partner some tactics for dealing with that difficult person in the workplace. But time number 6, time number 12, time number 48 that you come back to complain or air it out about that same problem, at a certain point, I think it becomes, I want attention. I am exhibiting I'm showing off how hard things are for me because I want more
Because
attention.
I want you to feel sorry for me. I want your sympathy. And I'm not sure that that is what vulnerability asks. Does vulnerability say, hey, I need your sympathy? Or does vulnerability say, I want to feel understood? I just want you to hear me. You don't have to sympathize. And also, guys, um, sympathy and empathy, two separate things. Sympathies that now here, poor you, I feel so bad for you, pat, pat, pat on the head. And empathy is actually hearing somebody, taking it in and understanding where they're at. And so those are actually different emotions. Um when it okay, I find you to be one of the most vulnerable men that I have ever met. Because but and then weirdly, it's all and I also think you're one of the most confident even though you don't think of yourself that
I
way.
really don't, actually.
Where do you figure uh you learned to be vulnerable?
Oh, man.
Or did you?
Well, uh this was a lifelong lesson, I think, because my father was kind of I guess you would say, child of the Depression. He was born in 1937, and he grew up working class in Brooklyn. And I think one of the lessons that he took from his upbringing was do not complain. Do not complain and do not show vulnerability. It's not masculine or appropriate to do so. And so I think the times in his life when he was struggling, he had 4 kids very fast. My mother had expensive tastes. He was the sole breadwinner in the family. He worked in a business that was highly mercurial and unpredictable. He was a stockbroker for a time. And I think as a result, he was scared and anxious and worried and fearful a lot and did not know. It wasn't just that he did not know how to express that. He had been taught that expressing that was inappropriate and wrong. So as a result, he was very high strung and had an explosive temper. And I think for better or worse, I probably took on a lot of those lessons as the oldest son, that was an appropriate way to behave. Keep it to yourself.
Ah.
Keep it to yourself. And I sought out partners that encouraged me to keep it to myself, that your inner life is your own business. Am I answering your question?
Well, yes. I mean, you're answering you're answering the question of where you didn't learn empathy.
Yeah, where I didn't. Now, the thing is, I had a wonderful, attentive, caring mother who was very attuned to my emotional inner life and encouraged me to be just as undone as I needed to be. So I was getting a set of contradictory messages
So, were you able to go to your mom and cry?
at the outset. But I do think that there came a time because I had a very without getting too deep in the weeds on this, I had a very weird childhood because I was a large child and because I spoke early and did well on standardized tests. My parents put me in first grade at 4. And so I like to say I was emotionally unprepared for everything that happened to me between the age of 4 and now. I mean, when you're 4 surrounded by 6-year-olds, when you're 11 surrounded by 13-year-olds, but you're the same size and intellectual capacity as those kids, it's a weird sort of behavioral science experiment
Yeah.
about what if we put this kid in a situation where he's way over his head all the time. All the time. It was very hard. I got stomach aches all the
Yeah.
time, those anxiety stomach aches that plagued me. Anyway, the point is, it was very, very difficult. And in the early going, I felt I could talk to my mom about it, right? But I also felt that school was a very hostile environment. Kids didn't like me. I was bullied a lot. I was a weirdo. I wasn't athletically able to keep up with them because of course I'm 9 and you're 11.
Oh, so you're not particularly athletic. So
What about that jump shot, baby? What about that jump shot? What about how we race up the hill every afternoon?
and you never beat me.
Okay, here's my point. Here's my point. I believe at a certain juncture, probably with the onset of adolescence, I started to believe that my mother didn't want to hear about that stuff.
Did she act in any way that
I
would make
don't
you think,
know. I don't know. And I should probably close out this or at least amend this discussion of my mother saying that she died when I was 17. And the key person that I could talk to about my emotions at all was out of my life. So this incipient trend toward keep it to yourself, Jeff. This is yours to handle. Men don't talk about stuff like this. That was definitely cut and cauterized at that age.
wow.
I didn't know how to deal with the feelings of grief and loss that came with her illness and death because I went right back to school and kept marching, like kept putting one foot in front of the other. I don't even know if a lot of my classmates and friends knew this was going on.
Yeah, that's kind of awful, and I can't imagine how I mean, it was obviously so rough that you've actually forgotten what you sort of are missing those 2 years. You don't even quite remember how you felt or what you did.
I have a pretty ironclad memory for a lot of things, but the exact
Definitely for dumb
circumstances
details and numbers.
exactly. But the exact circumstances, like the days leading up to her death, and then how I felt walking around in this fog immediately, I don't remember this at all. I don't remember it at all. It's like, again, the metaphor I always think of, it's like the film got stuck in the projector and burned away.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to access a lot of these memories because it was so painful and I was so lost. And so, am I answering your question?
Well, not entirely, but you're kind of building a case, which is interesting. So my question then becomes, when did you learn to be vulnerable? When did you learn that, or when did you exhibit vulnerability, and what was the response to vulnerability?
Well, one important distinction that we talked about in a previous episode is the distinction between a display of scars and a display of wounds.
Correct. This was my metaphor, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
So,
And
this one goes like this. If, scars are obviously previous hurt that have healed over, it's that they're done, and, in fact, often, most often, scars are the toughest skin because the skin has knitted over, and sometimes you have no feeling left in scars. And the skin is thicker. It's actually harder to get through old scars. So when you meet somebody, and I think this was the mistake I was making in vulnerability, is
yes.
that I mistook old scars for open wounds, which is vulnerability. But, it's all sort of this male display, and by the way, guys are super good at displaying their old scars, right?
Yeah. What
Like, "See this? I got this in a knife fight.
look
See
how tough I
this?"
am.
Yeah, exactly. "See this over here was an operation because I was trying to, save this, woman from a bus," etcetera, etcetera. Um, so men are very good at telling you their past hurts that have healed over. So,
And look how advanced I am for having healed from this terrible trauma. Look how cool I am. That's the that's the problem,
yeah,
is that what often passes for a display of vulnerability is actually a display of male invulnerability. Look at the armor I grew. That
yeah,
is
this
not.
and this and this, these terrible things happened to me when I was little, and I have overcome them. See, like this is where I am now. Well, that is definitely not vulnerability. Uh, those are the old scars. Now, vulnerability is to have the guts to show somebody an open wound, your shame. And
Yeah.
is, um, that feels really dangerous to do that because if you do that, well, then of course you risk being walked away from.
You risk being judged, you risk being diminished. There's a lot of risk in that. I think for men and women,
To
obviously.
me, that was always if I dared to show somebody my shame, they would just not love me anymore. Yeah, because they only loved the shiny me. They don't like the real me.
Yeah, and this is a roundabout way of answering your question, but I would say that the relationships that I forged starting in my 20s through my marriage and so forth were kind of contingent upon handle your business. Handle your business. Yes, I'm open to hearing about your difficult life at times, but I also need to know you've got it sorted. I also need to know that you're on top of it and that you can handle it. And if you need somebody to whine to every once in a while, I'm willing to do that, but up to a point. And then at that point, I'm going to begin to say things like, grow up and
And get over
get
it.
over it, which is something I started to hear a lot. So to get to the answer to your question, like, when did I finally learn that it was okay to exhibit vulnerability inside a relationship? This happened just over 3 years ago. I mean, to be fair, I worked in writers' rooms for 30 something years where discussions about characters experiencing vulnerability perhaps gave me safe cover to talk about things that had happened to me or frustrations I was having, but I always had the mask of a character or a scene or a story to hide behind.
Yeah.
So I had certain kind of ways of cathartically working through this in the art. But in terms of being able to actually be that undone, no, not so much. And I still find myself, I mean, 3 years into this relationship, I'm perpetually astonished by the fact that I have a partner who can not only hear and receive these kind of messages, but when I talk about feeling undone or scared or not up to the task or like I'm failing, or this is for you, this is like it's like gold to you to hear someone who can show those things to you. Am
Well,
I expressing this right?
sure. But it's because I mean, there's a very like there's a certain amount of build up and reason why I feel this strongly about male vulnerability. To me, being able to uh, uh, talk about your shame, which is vulnerability to me,
Right.
is um, it's also a self awareness and an honesty that you uh, th- that if you are self aware and you understand what the problems are, then we will be able to you will be able to uh, do better in the future. So it is kind of a little bit of like if I can tell you, if I tell you, for example, you know, look, this is a sore spot with me. When you tell me, when you criticize me, it's a soft spot because in the past, critique always meant that I'm not loved and that somebody's going to walk away from me next. You're going to criticize me and then you're going to walk away from me. So just be aware that this is how I feel. Like that's a vulnerability, right? Um, and if you said this to me, I would think, "Oh my god, he understands where this comes from." And so if I'm hearing him and I remember that critique is hard for him to take, I will give it much gentler. I will sort of do my part and then he will be able to hear me better.
Right. And you know what else you're pointing out? And this is a little bit of a side road, but I think it's important in terms of the 20 good summers of it all. You know how I love to come back to this theme. I think that over time, it seems to me, based on what you've told me, that overt, ostentatious displays of invulnerability are a prelude to catastrophe.
Oh, well, of course they are
And that,
prelude to catastrophe.
do you want me to unlock that iPad for you?
Yeah, in a moment, because I
Okay.
do feel
Yes,
like
because
this is a good time to go on into
yes.
our first
Yes. Okay.
listener email.
Okay. Let me just finish this thought.
Yes,
And
please.
the thought is this. Okay. I think that, yeah, definitely don't move that
Yeah.
email. Okay.
Right.
I did that. That was me. Um, what I was going to say is that I think that, uh, weirdly, I think for you, those expressions of vulnerability, mean you can trust the person you're dealing with. That you're not getting the
I'm
shiny
not
outer
getting
shell. You're
hustled.
not getting hustled. You're not being told. You're not being sold a version of somebody. You're getting an authentic version of somebody.
Yeah, and that is like critical to me because I think um for me one of the most difficult things in my life to learn and I'm still learning is to trust. Trust has been very very difficult for me as, child of parents who abandoned her and, being pushed and pulled around the world pretty much my whole life and whatever various other things that happened. Trust for me is incredibly difficult. So when somebody shows me their bleeding wounds, it also means they trust me and therefore I can trust them. So it becomes kind of a beautiful, validation of I can validate their feelings and their shame, uh, because I know they trust me to keep them safe.
Let me ask you this again before we go to this because we have an excellent email on this theme. But is that have you had that in prior relationships, in prior love relationships, in prior friendships? Have you had that exchange of vulnerabilities in other relationships in the past?
You know what? I've come to find out that I've had much, much, much less of it than I thought. And at some point, I mean, I have absolutely, you know, uh, no, I've absolutely mistaken scars for wounds,
Hmm.
in the past. And so, no, but I also, hey, 50% of the fault is mine here because I was the one that that what I put out into the world was, I am invulnerable. I don't need your help. I don't know how to ask for help. Allow me to tend to your needs and take care of you. And so, of course, I get only the people who were interested in being taken care of when they felt like being taken care of on their own time. And so, no, that I wasn't looking. I thought I was looking for vulnerability. I thought I was looking for this sort of beautiful, back and forth between two people, but in fact, no, I was just looking to tend to somebody so they would need me, so they wouldn't leave me.
Mm.
And so I got it completely wrong, and I only started learning the true value of vulnerability and what it really is and how I look for it, only a little bit before I met you.
Yeah. What was it that kind of upended the previous paradigm? Like, what is it that made you realize that what you've been seeking in the past led you down a destructive road?
Oh, a really disastrous relationship about 6 years ago. That definitely drove it home. It was in some ways it was really fantastic because it broke all concepts of everything that I held sacred and believed in. It managed to shatter all of that, and so in rebuilding it and looking at myself and going, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? And I identified plenty of places where I had gone wrong, and that sort of allowed me to start from 0,
Yeah.
which is where apparently I had to start, but it was incredibly painful, as you know.
Yes.
I it's not something I would highly recommend to everyone, but if if you're one of those people that got sort of set back to 0 and got your life shattered and completely reset, the the silver lining is that you can rebuild better because you know how the foundations need to be erected. You understand what material it takes. You have so much more wisdom and knowledge in the rebuild that you'll rebuild a lot better.
Yeah, and I think potentially you've learned, like, conclusively that the old strategy is just not gonna work for you anymore.
No, it really hasn't in the past.
You
So
really that I wanna come back to this topic about, being educable,
yeah,
which I
that's a good topic
yes, we're
because
gonna
this
yes, but we will return to that. Please, we wanna talk about this wonderful email we got.
yeah, well, we have 2 really great emails, and they're both go sway in slightly different
Okay,
directions.
go
So
for
I
it.
think this is kind of interesting because this email is from Madeline. Madeline, thanks so much for writing in. You're
Yeah.
one of the first people to write in too, which is awesome. Now Madeline is married. She's married to Joseph, and they are 58 and 56 respectively, and they've been together for 18 years. So she's saying, regarding vulnerability, I believe it's important when shared in equal doses. When trust and safe space are established, vulnerability truly strengthens a relationship. We both grew up with narcissistic parents and were primed for survival mode, which makes one feel exposed, but doesn't necessarily teach how to be vulnerable or open to it. In fact, it often forces you to rely on yourself and distrust others. In my experience, real growth happens when you realize you have a partner who will stay by your side even when fights or problems arise. That's my spiel on this topic. You're absolutely right, Matt.
Madeline, that's
Good.
very insightful, and look what she did there in 2 sentences. She was able to encapsulate what it's taken us 28 minutes to unfold.
Well, in
That
my case, 60 freaking years.
yeah, so tell me, yeah, this resonated with you. Tell me about your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, she dips into this a little bit with narcissistic parents and vulnerability. You are and feeling exposed. You cannot be exposed or vulnerable around people with a whole lot of narcissism because they will use it for their own good.
Yeah.
And so it's not that thing I was talking about, that vulnerability thing going both ways. You tell me, this spot hurts, and I will make sure that I make it easier for you. I don't step on that spot. And then you appreciate the fact that I don't step on that spot and I try to get around it. And this way we sort of understand, validate, and grow together to, make it all easier on both of us. That does not exist if you are partnered with a narcissist, which is something that I've always been drawn to narcissists because, um,
Yes.
childhood.
But okay, but how do you tell the difference? How do you tell the
Wait,
difference
the difference between what?
between like a how do you when you realize that you're in a relationship with a narcissist
Mhm.
versus a person who is exhibiting a genuine display of vulnerability. Sometimes one can masquerade as the other.
Well, I think mostly only in instances of if the and I'm sorry, I'm gonna dip into, like, therapy speak here.
Well, we
If
are
the
licensed therapists. We are, and if our credits are available on request.
I figure if you can fake it, you can make it, and so I'll just continue to therapize
Go for it.
myself, you,
Yeah.
and Jeff
Great, great, great.
because I'm so good at it, clearly. It only took me 60 years to, like, get any notion of who I am, but anyway. So the narcissists do tend to come in like there's the grandiose narcissist, my dad. And then there is the victim or martyr narcissist, my grandmother. And they seem very different on the surface. You're not necessarily the grandiose you can kind of tell after a while. They only speak about themselves and they only talk to you as long as you help them make them feel terrific about themselves. And they're also usually the shiniest and most attractive people at a
Very
party.
charismatic.
Uh-huh.
People are drawn to them. But yeah, it's a little easier to spot because
Yeah,
they're spectacular.
exactly. Now the sort of the victim, the
Yes.
quiet,
This is a little trickier to spot.
that is much tricky because it actually may seem to be a vulnerability when they tell you how they're suffering, right? Oh, this person made me feel this way, and this person made me feel this way. And if only it hadn't been for, my house constantly being in shadow, I would have a suntan. That's when, like, how do you figure out that that's not actual vulnerability?
Yeah. How do you?
I don't know. I thought you'd have the answer to yours. Come
Oh,
up with something.
tricky. It's tricky.
As a licensed therapist on his time off.
I have a little bit of experience with this subspecies, and it is very tricky. Um, I think that at a certain point, after this refrain comes up 6 or 7 times in the song, you realize that it is nothing but a way to magnetize attention back to themselves and take it away from you. Only one person in the relationship is allowed to have problems and is allowed to be afflicted, and that is they. Uh, and it is an interesting sort of judo logic way of making your weakness your strength. And I think in an almost animalistic fashion, these are people who use you. I don't know if I used this metaphor before, but I think about this image all the time from Mad Max Fury Road. Remember at the beginning of Mad Max Fury Road, he's strapped to the front of a truck as
As a blood bag.
a blood bag.
Yeah.
He's there to provide nothing
But
but blood for so-called superior human beings. You realize at a certain point you are being used as a blood bag, that you're simply there. This person is consuming your life force.
you're always a blood bag to a
To a
narcissist.
narcissist.
Yeah.
I want to share something that you and I have talked about, and I'm afraid Pete has heard me refer to this many, many times. You ready?
Mhm.
Milton Glaser was the graphic artist who designed, among other things, I Heart New York. How about that? One guy thought that up, I Heart New York. Milton Glaser gave a commencement speech at a university in which he talked about his 10 rules for living. I'm going to skip 1, 2, and then 4 through 10. Number 3 was the great one.
Uh-huh.
We have talked about this.
Yeah,
Number 3, the pithy summary of it was some people are toxic, avoid them. I find that a boring way of encapsulating what he said next. He said, he talked about this both in terms of personal and professional interactions. Okay. He said, in your interactions with someone, you may find that it's incredibly pleasant and calm and easygoing and fun. And yet when you walk out of the room, your knees buckle because you're so drained from that interaction. You want to go home and you want to go sleep it off. On the other hand, you may find that an interaction with someone is incredibly contentious and stormy and they drive you crazy. But when you walk out of that room, you're energized. You can't wait to get to work. You can't wait to slay the dragon. He said, the former type are draining your life force and you need to minimize your exposure to them. They are using you as a blood bag, whereas the second type may hide in a very conflict-laden relationship. but it turns out it's enlivening. It's lighting you up. It's electrifying you. That is a good and healthy relationship. Of course, when they talk about couples who don't fight, right? Couples who don't fight doesn't
A
necessarily
lot of
mean,
people are very proud of the fact that
yeah,
they don't fight. And you know what? It's whatever works
whatever
for
works.
you. I know people that really don't fight with each other very much, and their relationships are thriving. So there's no shade on
Yeah.
anybody. But generally, and as our guru Terry Real says,
Yes.
it's not fighting is kind of impossible if you're living together and if you are exposed to each other at all times and you have to do things together. Some of them are not going to work out, and sometimes you lose your patience. But it's really about how well can you make up
And
for
how do you
fights.
exactly? How do you
But
feel
now you
after that interaction? My point is,
yes.
we were talking about how to, what is my point?
What is your
What
point,
is,
Jeff?
my point is that if you're looking for a way to distinguish the display of vulnerability from the narcissistic fetishization of victimhood,
Uh-huh.
ask yourself how you feel at the end of an extended interaction with that person. Because if the display of vulnerability results in shared closeness, you feel as heard as you are hearing, you feel more bonded, you feel more connected, that's a good sign. If you feel that the
So are you
battery is drained,
yeah, then it's narcissist. But are you
that's what I'm
saying that
saying.
vulnerability makes you feel charged up? Does it charge your battery when somebody gives you I mean, to me it does, for
I
sure.
think it
It
strengthens
charges
the connect. That's
it
the
charges
point.
my battery.
It does.
Intimacy, being intimate with one another is really like the closeness that you can only have when you can truly hear each other. And I feel like in my life I have not often been heard. In fact, probably almost never. And part of this again is on me because I wasn't speaking clearly.
Right.
I wasn't I was very passive aggressive in my past life. I mean, this present life, not the one in which I was Cleopatra.
Yes.
Um, uh, I I had such a hard time expressing my needs or my shame because I would feel that that would then make me unlovable. So I didn't, and then I expected for people to just know. And guess what? That tactic really doesn't work. But that is also that is more about being invulnerable, about not daring to be vulnerable. And women are generally encouraged that or told society-wise as a woman, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's fine for us to cry, for example. Crying being a show of vulnerability, which it is not always. Sometimes it's just drama or victimhood. But for me, it was vulnerability. For me, crying, I didn't cry for like 30 years. In fact, I remember at some point I cried in my like late 40s and somebody said, "Wow, you're crying? Well, that's something. You really must be hurting this time."
Wow.
Yeah, I made such a effort not to cry because it would make me seem weak. And this is usually masculine traits. Um and if I was weak, then nobody would want me. So, I stayed away from that. How much crying did you do in your life?
I would cry in the shower. Anyone know
That's
that one?
so sad.
I would duck around the corner when I felt tears coming to my eyes and find some quiet place to release those feelings. I had other bad ways of dealing with emotional turmoil. Like I was a compulsive overeater for a really long time. Maybe not clinically so. Maybe I shouldn't use that term. But I was really fat. I definitely ate to soothe bad feelings. I was 85 pounds heavier than I am now.
Yeah, but
Uh,
you're a giant man, so it doesn't
okay,
seem like
still,
that
I know
bad.
people always say that, but to me that underrates how gross I felt about myself and that I smothered bad feelings with kudos bars. It's not a healthy way of dealing with it. I have a lot of addicts in my family, and I was always kind of grateful that alcoholism didn't find its way to me. But what did find its way to me was pizza and ice cream.
Mm,
They're right there for the
mm,
taking.
mm, mm.
Uh, so I had lots of really counterproductive ways of dealing with those feelings. But to go back to your question, did I cry? Sure, I did.
It makes me so sad to think of you crying.
Crying and eating pizza? Yeah,
No, crying in the shower, crying and eating pizza, ew.
in the shower.
Because that would be
I probably did do that at one point.
I have misophonia, so that's way too much
Yeah, with too much
gross sounds.
too much stim.
Yeah, way too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think thankfully, I did not hew so much to the masculine stereotype that I thought I was not allowed to cry. But in the context of school, oh my God. I mean, when you're bullied and tears come to your eyes, like
Oh
that, you get
gosh.
bullied twice as hard.
Oh, yeah, yeah, no.
Yeah, because you're a wuss on top of being all the other things they've called you. So, and it's funny. I want to go to something. I know we have another email you want to get to, but I do want to go to
Well,
something
the
that
other
you said.
email is actually very pertinent to what we were
Okay,
talking
go.
about
Okay,
too.
let's
No,
go
no, no,
to.
go ahead.
Okay, here's what I was going
Yeah,
to say.
tell me.
P said in passing in this conversation something that she has told me a couple of times over the years that I am genuinely astonished by, which is she sees me as a confident person, which is crazy pants to me because I think of myself as the shy, worried, anxious, self effacing, self lacerating, like zero confidence person. But I guess what you see is a guy who perhaps, I don't know, when people say like stuff about me on Instagram or I come in for criticism, it just bounces off. Like at this point, I've heard everything.
Well,
I've heard everything. There's nothing you can say to me that I haven't already thought up myself.
well, yeah, okay, granted, but look, I was also incredibly bullied as a child, which you know. And I feel like I learned not to cry in part because of that as well. Um, but I like I I think I'm acquiring confidence now. But meeting you, when I met you, I thought you were the most confident man I've ever met because you dared to be vulnerable. That was a big part of your confidence, is that you dared to be vulnerable. And also, and it's not about taking critique well, although that is a part of it, but it's how you take it. Turning, if somebody critiques you and you go, well, fuck them, they're an asshole. That's not taking critique well. uh, you can take it in. See, this is I can say something to you that might not be super flattering, and you, instead of dismissing it, discarding it, getting defensive, throwing it back at me, telling me I'm crazy, which is pretty much how every man I've ever been with has dealt with, you will actually sit down and go, "Oh, you really think so? Well, what makes you think that?" Like, let's get into it and let's
Yeah,
explore it
let's talk
and
through.
and let's see if we can fix that. Like, if it
Now,
bothers you, I am totally open to doing something about it or do see. Okay, so this is just I did mention I have misophonia, right? If you don't know what misophonia is, it's a stupid but it's well, it's not a disease, but it's a what? It's a
it,
condition. It's a condition. It's a stupid condition in which you have a really hard time with certain sounds. Usually there are sounds like eating sounds, like smacking sounds, wet sounds, slurping sounds, licking sounds, chewing sounds, crunching sounds. I, I
that,
mean, I can go on. There's a lot.
clearly there's a litany right there, very close to the surface.
So, for me, like if I hear somebody eating loud or slurping, I literally want to stab them with a fork or alternately myself if I think that they will not stop slurping. When my dog licks himself, I want to kick him and it's really mean. I don't kick him, by the way. I realize this is my problem, but I have to walk away. Now, my whole life it has been like this, and when a partner of mine exhibited any sort of food noises or biting their nails noises or anything like that, and if I'd mention it, I'd go, "Oh, would it be okay for you not to chew your nails right now?" They would get angry at me. And
You'd get lashed out at.
I'd get lashed out at, so I learned to walk away. I had the only thing I can do in this circumstance is to walk away.
Because you won't get a hearing, because you'll get lashed out at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'll get and I get called like, "Hey, you're crazy. Why don't you go and attend to your own crazy?" And I agree. It is my own crazy. It is a problem for me. It doesn't seem to be a problem for anybody else. When I met Jeff, and like one of my things, okay, so I said, the four things that a partner has to have for me
Yeah.
for the priorities. I should have put in a fifth one. They can't eat loud. Um,
That's the deal breaker.
yeah, it's a total deal
Except I
breaker.
do. I do
And
do that sometimes.
and when we started dating, I realized that you did eat loud, and I
At
thought,
times. Can we say at times, or do you want to say at all times?
well, you were pretty sort of, blasé about eating loud.
Ah, this is so
And
unflattering.
it is. But see, this is how he took it. When I did say it one morning where I couldn't handle you crunching the cereal or something, and I was like,
Yes.
"Do you think, I have misophonia? First, I'll take the blame on myself. This is my problem. I realize it's my problem. I'm really, really sorry, but this bothers me. Is there anything we can do about that, or do I have to walk away from breakfast?" And Jeff was like, "Oh, sorry, sure," and then just closed his mouth, and that was it. That was it. And it was like,
I isn't that
"Okay,
crazy? I'm the son of I
okay."
know, but I'm not an American hero, guys. That's what one should do to be sensitive to one's partner.
Well,
I
one would
think
think, but
I
boy,
think that's what you're supposed to do. By the way, I still crunch things all the time. I was crunching things shortly before we got on the mic. I was crunching some
that's
almonds.
right, and I
You
was
had
pointing out to him that he has a tendency to eat louder when he is showing me how casual and relaxed he is.
yeah, that is true. That
It's
is
like,
true.
"Okay, so let's not be relaxed ever again. Everything is a white
Right.
cloth,
Yeah.
dinner
Okay.
napkin kind
Yeah.
of
Okay.
occasion."
Yeah, I know. I bet. Listen, I'm a Southerner. I'm a little bit of a slob. Okay,
Oh,
but
Southerners are not slobs, they have superb manners.
I
What
also
am
have
I saying?
superb manners. Don't I have superb manners?
Yes, you do
How
have
about the
ability
pulling out
of
of chairs and
and
opening car
opening
doors?
doors and putting studs and stuffing me into a jacket I don't want to wear.
What are you talking about? What do you mean stuffing you into a jacket?
You know, when you hold up my jacket?
Oh, I do always hold it.
Yeah, sometimes you get the sleeves wrong, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's really well meant.
Okay, but the point of this story
Yeah.
is that you've learned, like, you have a partner who's going to accept criticism without turning it into a referendum on you're crazy or without shaming you or hitting you with anger. It seems so simple, right? It
Mm.
seems so simple, but it's far from
And
simple.
to me, that is confidence, is when you can hear your partner, your friend, your child say, "Hey, you know what? When you do this, it really like it bothers me, or I have an issue with this, or I have a problem with this. Can you help me out?" And you can go, "Oh, God, sure, of course, no problem."
I should also say this is not just about eating noises, to be fair. This is about all sorts of behaviors, okay? This is
Well, of
about
course.
yeah, I mean, without getting into in the weeds on this, but we had a discussion recently about a way I behaved while watching a football game,
Uh-huh.
and I was very abrasive. And my partner called me out on being quite abrasive. And of course, my first line of defense, again, I'm not that evolved. My first line of defense was to talk about all the reasons it was okay for me to behave that way
Yeah, yeah.
and try to convince you that that feeling that you had wasn't valid. And does this sound familiar to anybody? From both sides, by the way.
Yeah.
But then we always talk about setting aside our courtroom shoes. I set aside the courtroom shoes, and I came to understand actually it had nothing to do with football. It actually had to do with how I was feeling about myself
Mm,
in the run up to watching that game.
mhm.
And a lot of that
And actually,
abrasive,
what you were feeling at that time was kind of vulnerable.
weirdly, and again, without getting like too in the weeds on this story, the point was I was actually at a fairly vulnerable place. And what watching this game with some friends brought out in me was a very, very unpleasant color, which was born of the fact that I wasn't feeling so good about myself in the weeks leading up to this. And it led, the point of the story is, it led to actually a very good, open, vulnerable discussion about what I was going through. How did we get there? Because I did not tell her she was crazy for critiquing my behavior watching the game. We actually got out the spades and like dug a little bit and found out that there was something rather important going on that had nothing to do with a football game.
And you dared to admit colors that are not generally seen as, being particularly celebrated in the male domain. Perhaps, there are times where you're feeling like you know,
Down on myself.
yeah, just the whole thing of like, I need to be the provider. I need to be this. I need to be strong. I need to be this and that. And, I need to be the warrior and I need to brandish my sword and win the battles so that my beloved will look up to me with
So
those
she'll keep
starry
liking me.
eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this woman is not interested in that at
I
all.
know this is the other thing, the other revelation after this discussion, and I've had to learn this lesson over and over and over and over again in the years we've been together, is that my beloved does not want the invulnerable superhero. First of all, that man does not exist.
Mm.
Second of all, guys who act like invulnerable superheroes have led you to some rather dark places in the past.
They are the least confident and the most ashamed little boys you could possibly hope to find.
And so I, again, am perpetually astonished that when I am able to push past my own resistance to these displays of vulnerability, confusion, the sense that I'm failing, the sense that I'm not as entertaining or like groovy as I should be, when I'm able to share those feelings with my partner, this light comes into her eyes, a light of trust, care. I mean, it's unreal to me. And you'd think by this point I would know the quality of the person I'm with, but I'm still learning.
Yep, that's fine
Okay.
there. Yeah, let's
Go
go
to
to the email.
second, you want to go to the other
Yeah.
email, and here we go. And I believe all you got to do is
Nope,
nope,
that's
not
not
that one. It's the
no.
one below it.
No,
That
it's from
one.
from Shishi. Where's Shishi?
There it is. Okay,
Okay.
there it is.
So this email, this is a long one, and I want to read this one because I think this one is really interesting because of the male to female vulnerability aspects. Okay, so this one is from Shishi, and she says, "Hello, beautiful soul. She loved our podcast. She's so sweet. Thank you so much." Okay. Uh, and this is to some, I guess, to my question at the end of the first podcast. Um, she says, "I truly love people who are able to be vulnerable. And this trait is definitely something I look for in my future partner. However, recently I dated a man where I found that I started to diminish my natural empathy for when he continued to share, more like complain, about the people in his life, his ex-wife, mother, ex-girlfriends, etc., along with other feelings he would have or physical or emotional pains in his life.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, I know he's not doing this maliciously, but this has really closed up my heart to him because it doesn't feel vulnerable to me. It feels overwhelming. Here's what I mean. When I brought this up to him, he was surprised to hear it because he felt like he was just sharing life with me. And he said that that's what he expects from a life partner. So he actually felt hurt by me when I didn't show empathy during a moment when he shared about the pain in his shoulder, for example. I apologize about that particular incident because he's right. In that moment, I didn't feel empathy because of in the past moments, I felt like he was trying to gain sympathy from me instead of knowing how to be responsible for his own emotions and then simply sharing with me. And so, in that, I learned a lot from this relationship and this man. Oh, and this man does have other wonderful qualities, but this was one important aspect that really closed my heart. To him, he thought he was being vulnerable, but to me, it felt more like a burden when he overshares. I've rarely experienced this with other past partners. In fact, when past partners shared vulnerability with me about their feelings, desires, hopes, and fears, I naturally leaned in more and felt closer. Most of them have also expressed the ease at which it is to share and to be vulnerable. But with this partner, my body wanted to lean away because it didn't feel clean. It didn't feel like he was taking responsibility for his feelings and instead was grasping for me to give him the acknowledgement and sympathy that he so craved and I'm sure lacked from childhood. And that felt repelling to me.
Mm.
I also imagine that this would I also imagine what this would do to him not feeling loved, accepted, and sympathized with in that moment of need, which is something we all crave from our partners. I guess maybe there is a nuance to vulnerability. Maybe like when we are humble and we take personal responsibility for our feelings, events sharing is a way of true connection, but when we still hold judgments, resentments, fears, insecurities, sharing with our partners becomes more heavy and maybe will cause our partners to feel even more disconnected. I'm still searching my own heart to see if I'm somehow taking this wrongly or if there's something I need to improve upon, which I'm certain there is. But I thought I'd share this interesting experience with you both, as this is what I'm going through at this very moment when
Mm.
I was watching your episode. This man I'm dating has a beautiful tendency to also want growth and is learning self reflection. So, for that, I admire his earnestness and sincerity to growth.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Not
It's
amazing?
fascinating, actually. So, what's your initial response to
No, 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 no,
what?
no.
What?
I'm gonna throw it to you first. What is your first initial response to this is how a woman is feeling about a man who says that he is just sharing his vulnerable feelings with her about his mother, his ex-girlfriends, his
Okay.
ex-wife, his pain in his shoulder.
I have two thoughts.
Mm.
Two thoughts. You ready?
Yep.
Thought number one. The first thing that Gigi outlined was this guy has a litany of complaints about the women in his life. And the old saw is if he's exhibiting those complaints about them, he's prepping to exhibit those complaints about you, right? It's exactly what you said to me when you were talking about that question that you asked me about what went wrong in your previous relationship, right?
Right.
The old saw is if you hear someone, male or female, complain excessively about how ill-treated they've been by every partner, by every friend, by every parent, oh, they are loading up to exhibit the same complaints about you. So I would say, and maybe this is not the response that Gigi wants, but the first place I went is, man, does this guy have a lot of grievances. A lot of grievances against women. And I would be extremely cautious
Well,
about that.
we are sort of you are sort of harvesting that out of the
You
ether
think
because
that's
she
unfair?
perhaps because she did say, like his unhappiness, and then she did mostly mention women, but she also mentioned his aching shoulder and
Okay.
other aspects, other things that he is, uh, I guess, being vulnerable about, or is he just complaining?
Well,
Is he being a martyr? Is he being a victim?
this goes to my other response, which is this goes to the Milton Glaser test, right? You feel swamped by the amount of it isn't just like the amount of care, the amount of attention, the amount of whining and complaining that this guy wants to do. It's so much. You feel overwhelmed. I don't think that that is a marker since you say this is something that you have not experienced in the past. I don't think this is a marker of like an empathy gap or a sympathy gap that exists within you. It's that you got swamped, that like the gutters overflowed. Like there was no way for you to channel the amount of sympathy that this guy seemed to be demanding. What do you think of that?
Well, yes, possibly, but I also am now thinking back to all of the instances in which I have spoken to girlfriends or other emails that we have
Yeah.
gotten from women, and it's usually women like my generation around, like or 40s, 50s, 60s, a little bit on the older side that say that when their partner shows too much vulnerability, it makes them feel unsafe.
Okay.
And I find that really interesting because then you're sort of saying that your male partner is there to make you feel safe. And of course, this is a
Yeah.
sociological, it's that has existed for thousands of years, right? Men are supposed to be powerful and keep the women safe, and I guess we're supposed to be attractive so that we can be desired by the men as like prizes and be vessels for their seed.
No.
Um,
Okay.
Oh,
No, no, no. Fair.
that's the
No,
way no,
gotcha.
but that's what it reminds me of a little bit, is when you say, I want my guy to make me feel safe. I don't want him to be too vulnerable because it makes me feel unsafe." I think, what about you making yourself feel safe? Like, how much power have you given to your man so that he can, make you feel unsafe so easily? Um, and I'm saying this because I once was that woman. I was married for 33 years, and I absolutely I my husband made me feel very safe, which is one of the things that I really treasured about our relationship was that I felt very safe. But I felt very safe when it came to sort of just, like financial and sort of the structural parts of a relationship. And the emotional parts was all me, children and how people felt and birthdays. And that was all like my domain. So I guess the way my partner would make me feel unsafe in those moments would be financially. If he came to me and he said, "Oh, oops, I just managed to lose all of our money." I would think, "Well, that sucks." And that would make me feel unsafe. That would make me feel very, very anxious. But at the same time, I grew up with no money. I know I can do with no money. I mean, very little. I have before. I know how to, make meatloaf from mostly stale white bread. Like there are, eh, you didn't. I didn't grow up in a communist country for nothing. I like, if you ever were stranded on a desert island, you definitely want me as a partner because
Sure.
I can find food and build lodgings and knit sweaters out of,
Sand. Yeah. What? Sand.
don't knit sweaters out of sand.
Yes.
I was looking for, like,
The thing on a desert island.
the vines,
From
like,
the
from trees.
palm
Like, Nick,
fronds.
even I can't knit from sand. Hold on, that sounds like a great book,
Yes.
Knit from Sand.
Yes.
So anyway, so like the male masculinity, the masculine version of vulnerability can somehow not intrude upon the woman's sense of security. So how vulnerable are you allowed to be, and where are you allowed to be vulnerable?
Yeah. This is, I think, the question, and clearly there isn't a bright line. Uh, that it's different. I mean, I think what she's saying in her email is that this is a particular kind of like emergency brake that clicked on that she's never felt before. And to me, that indicates something kind of chemical going on in this particular relationship that maybe it makes her feel unsafe. Maybe it's just too much bandwidth. Maybe there's no room for her emotions in this equation. She feels her own emotions are being crowded out because there's so much of his. It could be any or all of the above. Um, but I do think it comes down to the central contradiction, which this episode lies astride, which is how much male vulnerability do we really want?
And what is vulnerability and what is just whining?
Yes.
And you know what? I'm pretty sure we haven't solved it at all.
Well, it's good because we're reaching the end of our hour, and
You're definitely reaching the end of
yeah,
our hour, and we have made absolutely no headway.
I feel we've made important progress
I'm
on this
sure.
topic. Yes.
I think we blah blah blahed our way through this one, but if it makes you think and talk to your partner about this, or just go through it in your own mind of how much male vulnerability is allowed, and what is it only allowed in certain ways, or in certain subjects. Um, well, then I guess we've done our job.
I would like to, first of all, thank you to everyone who emailed, particularly these two women who shared their stories with us. You can hear the airplane probably coming out of a pattern in Burbank over our heads. Um, Thank you for writing to us. We would once again like to encourage you guys to continue this conversation. You can find us at 20goodsummers.com. There's a contact form which goes straight to us. Also, 20goodsummers@gmail.com. It all goes into the same bin. We love hearing from you. We still have dozens of emails we have yet to respond to, but no, we read every single one of them, and we're so grateful for the response that we've gotten from you guys.
That's right. And Madeline and Shishi, thank you so much for your terrific emails that really got our like brains whirling.
Exactly. Inspired this episode. So
Mm.
thanks for that. We'll be back with you next week.
That's right.
absolutely from a different location.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God, I'm so used to throwing it to you for a final thought, but I'm not going to do that.
I think you're used to it from some other previous installation in your life because it make like what?
I feel you should get the last word.
I don't want the last word. Bye.